So we're sitting here discussing what is happening now, what could be happening in the future, and how this applies to hardware and services.
Hmm.
And this is based on a conversation that you had at Data Center
That's right.
World, looking at specifically data centers. And we're going to widen that out a little bit to talk about enterprise as well, um, just so that other people can join in the conversation, basically. So beginning with what's happening very currently in the market, we've got supply chain constraints, we've got shortages of certain products. This is your area of the business. I'd like to hear your views on why this is happening and how it's affecting businesses like ours and more widely
Yeah,
the sector.
yeah, sure. No, great question. So the supply chain constraints have principally been driven by the demand for AI equipment and gear that will manage AI workloads. So there's a very limited silicon fabrication capacity on the globe, and a large amount of that capacity is now being locked by the big AI companies. So there's years and years, literally, of demand ahead, and of course that now limits the access that other companies have to more traditional silicon-based products. So what we're seeing is that the traditional IT vendors that our customers would typically purchase from, um, the um, the price has gone up quite considerably because there's a supply and demand issue. Customers having to wait far longer for equipment, um, should they be able to order it. So it creates a real challenge for them to manage their budgets, deploying new workloads. It's a real issue for them.
And pulling that apart slightly, a lot of people, when they think about AI workloads, would think about GPUs and then traditional workloads being CPUs. So how are the two markets affecting each other? Is it the processors that people are worried about, or is it more wide than that?
It's definitely wider. It's memory too. It's the processing units and also memory. But again, it really it comes down to there being a limit to the amount of capacity that we have in silicon manufacturing, and the manufacturers can make far more money manufacturing GPUs
Mhm.
than they can from CPUs, and the book of business that they have stretches years in advance, so they can set up to manufacture these things and generate more profit. So that's the way I would view it.
Mhm. And with that being the case, is that likely to change the way that we have to buy things in the future? Are people going to look at diversified supply chains, for example? So mixing refurb and new in, and are they going to have to look for better supplier aid in procuring the equipment that they need?
Yes, exactly. I think many companies have relied on what we call the primary supply chain, new equipment, and what we're certainly seeing is that customers are now turning to the secondary supply chain to create much more formalized relationships with suppliers like TechBuyer,
Hmm.
because we can provide equipment to them which is more than adequate to meet their workload requirements in a much faster time frame than they would do otherwise.
And what does that mean for procurement professionals? Because presumably there's a pivot between the questions you would ask of a new supplier and the questions you would ask of a refurbished supplier. Does that play into anything? Do you have to give more service as a product supplier than you used to
Um,
have to, sorry.
I mean, I would say the fundamental procurement questions probably remain the same, but I think it's important that procurement are holding their secondary market suppliers to the same standards or close to the same standards as new equipment suppliers on the primary market. So things like the certification of products that are being supplied is really important. Understanding where's it come from, has it been tested, what sort of warranty or support is available on those products. And in most cases, you can get equal levels of value and capability on the secondary refurb market as you can on the primary market.
Okay. So that's the supplier relationships part handled. But what about availability? So there's a restricted supply of new. What we're describing here means that things are kept in production for longer. So where do products come from in the secondary market, and how does the market decide what's valuable for a second use versus not, and what are the pathways of people selling into the secondary market, or providing it for the next stage?
Yeah, so I think you're right. The natural reaction to the market conditions would be to look at how do you extend the life of the product that you already own, as opposed to replacing it. I would say that other than in some exceptional circumstances, many customers actually don't really understand how to do that, especially in the space that we operate in. And would naturally, when an asset reaches the end of its natural life, would look at selling it or try to extract some level of financial value from it, which I think has sort of been the historic pattern. In my view, really what customers should be doing is not thinking about necessarily selling the asset, but thinking about what new job description can I give to this asset in my environment. So what job can I give it that will still create value and allow me to utilize the value that remains within it. And that's something that we can help a customer with, to really explore what workloads operate inside their environment, that something that's used and maybe no longer has a primary function could serve. And then secondly, we certainly, if that new job description doesn't exist in their organization, take it off their hands and look to find a customer that does. So I mean, we're yet to see, I think, the secondary market start to choke in terms of supply. We have plenty of supply of good refurbished, certified products here, and part of our expertise is being able to source responsibly from our suppliers to ensure that there's a ready supply for our customers.
So it's not so much the what, it's more the how. And that presumably requires a fundamental sea change in the way that the companies are using their enterprise IT. And their in-house skills may not be set up for that. Correct? So is that kind of...
Yeah, exactly. I think many IT teams, they have a pattern that they've got used to around the life expectancy of the products, the way they depreciate the products. And clearly, the market conditions are going to put a strain on those paradigms. So, what we're encouraging customers to do is to involve organisations like ours that have expertise in extending the life of these products, to really help them, to help understand, is there a useful value for these things inside of their organisation, or can we help them to actually create some financial value by selling it back to us, and then we can go and find a useful workload for this equipment to perform on.
So internally, I guess you would express that as cascading assets in circular economy terms. What kind of expertise and tooling is required from a company like TechBuyer to help people make those decisions? What have we got available to us in terms of analysing workload, maybe, or analysing what does what? Can you kind of...
Yeah, so I think being able to look at workloads, how workloads are changing, and how the underlying infrastructure can support those changes is really important. And there are many tools available to help with sort of workload profiling. I mean, one of the things that we would always recommend the customer does is to really look at how can we reduce the number of physical assets required to successfully operate the workloads. And to do that, you may need to look at upgrading or updating the assets that you currently have. So upgrading memory or CPUs is becoming quite a common activity, as opposed to replacing the whole the whole server, for example. That would be would be a key a key thing to consider.
And presumably, I mean, we did a piece of work on this as a company quite a few years ago on the difference between upgrading assets and replacing assets, and also shrinking the number of machines that workloads run on. That will obviously have implications for the amount of energy that you need to run your workloads, as well as the actual hardware that it sits on. In your experience, when customers are making procurement decisions, are they used to doing it in those two dimensions? What's my procurement cost and what's my operating cost? Or is that a kind of sea change in the way that people are going to have to think about assets going forward?
No, I think that's quite a common. It's quite common. I would say in the world of IT, it's a little bit more complicated than that. So if you're an IT organization, typically you'll have multiple stakeholders that you're trying to support in your business stakeholders, and they'll have their own unique set of applications or requirements. And if you had none of that complexity, actually you could probably shrink your environment down much further than you have today. But because you're serving these unique functions, they'll have their own unique needs. And of course, in IT, there's always a requirement to have some level of overhead or capacity because of redundancy. So you'll never be able to get it to its optimum theoretical minimum. So it's interesting, but really you have the business to IT alignment challenge that I just described, and then of course you have finance and the way that these assets are procured is important. The depreciation schedules are important, and also because some of these are capital assets, finance will view that as potentially value to the company by having these things on the books. So it's quite subtle and complex.
But those financial life cycles, or those financial lifetimes, presumably as you move towards a refurbished model, you're going to have to rethink those, because the standard life cycle for financial depreciation is about 3 years, right? How are we going to handle all that in in a more circular way?
Yeah. I would say that for servers, typically in my experience, it's like a 5-year depreciation for a new product. And look, we're not accountants, so we shouldn't be advising our customers on their accounting policy. But I think this cascade that you described is something that we really need to encourage all of our customers to start thinking about, rather than we buy it new and we replace it in 5 years, which is actually the commercial business model of our OEM partners. It's very much driven by their business, not because the asset necessarily needs to be replaced. There's still, as we know, a lot of good life left in those assets at that 5-year point. So I think we need to sort of encourage a culture inside of IT to really focus on maximizing value from assets that are owned, not necessarily to comply with the OEM's refresh cycle.
Yeah, and presumably in order to persuade technical people of that, you need to have a lot of metrics and measurements and evidence behind you when you're showing that this works, right?
Yeah, you do. And it's clearly there's a strong financial driver to this too. But in the end, our customers have got to understand that actually, even if they want to acquire new products, they probably can't. And even if they can, the price that they'd originally budgeted for has gone up significantly. So they've got to be creative. And I think, focusing on extending the life of assets that they have and turning to the secondary market for products that are perfectly adequate for what they need is a smart strategy.
Okay, so we've talked about what that looks like at enterprise level and with IT. This conversation came out of a conversation that you had at Data Center World. And there's another dimension to all of this when you take that IT into a data center. data center people tend not to be IT people. They tend not to get involved with the running of IT, but their customers do. Um, what are the challenges and opportunities within inside that kind of market for this kind of model?
Yeah, it's quite fascinating to observe the two worlds that are clearly closely coupled. They're adjacent to one another, and I've had actually the opportunity to experience both in my career, so I understand both worlds well. And yeah, they've sort of lived almost parallel lives. I think I mean, there's a couple of things to say. One, with the technology innovation cycles that are occurring in AI. Our customers are mainly focused on more traditional workloads, but we've got to a point now where technology is changing so fast on the AI side. It's really hard for the physical data center infrastructure teams to keep up. And it was fascinating at DCW to see the array of different innovation that was going on to try and ensure that the data center infrastructure is ready for the innovation that's coming. So, I mean, these two worlds already had a different sort of refresh innovation cycle, and it's just getting worse. I think the challenge is getting worse. I mean, the other thing is that whereas before they were adjacent worlds, now actually they're conjoined because the cooling is taking place inside of the server very much. It's direct to chip cooling. So no longer are they two separate things. They're actually one thing, and that's really going to force the teams to collaborate far closer, because to extend the life cycle of the products, to minimize energy consumption, etc., is going to require data from both of these worlds. And I think that was an interesting theme of the show, was the fact that no longer can we operate in these individual silos. We've got to find a way of bringing these things together, because then you can have a much more sustainable approach to this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. And so part of your head of innovation at TechBuyer, does that inform your thinking about where to have these conversations right now for an IT provider, or is it something that you're observing in the market that's going to have an effect on IT?
I think at this stage it's more observing, principally because this is happening for AI workloads, and our customers really aren't buying gear for AI workloads right now. But of course, we're in the business of selling both new equipment and refurbished equipment, and at a point in time, this innovation is going to trickle down into more mainstream workloads. Plus, we're going to have the opportunity at some point to acquire equipment that's been used in this AI for AI workloads. So we need to be ready such that we can test and refurb and certify these products. So we've got to be very observant as to what's going on, and make sure that when the time is right, we have an answer.
Mm-hmm. So you brought up the AI issue. It's interesting that you say that our customers, traditional IT operators, are not so impacted by what's happening in data centers with AI inference at the moment. How long do you think traditional enterprise IT is going to last for? What's going to happen there? Or, what's
If
your
only I had a
thinking
crystal
about?
ball.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you can't make an absolute prediction, but do you think that we're going to see CPUs become obsolete within a year, for example? I mean, I know that's a bit of an extreme example.
Yeah.
Do you see a world where these two ecosystems are going to operate in parallel?
Well, I think today they are essentially operating in parallel. I mean, what I observe actually is that there's quite a lot of what I'll call AI washing that goes on. So the suppliers of traditional software, especially, that they'll all say that their software is AI enabled. I would contend that maybe that isn't always really the case. It's great marketing, not necessarily the truth. But I think traditional workloads will be around for many years to come. And I think, one of the things I'm waiting for is an economic model that really justifies all of the investment that's going into AI. I mean, for me, it feels a bit like a bubble. It's a remarkable technology, so I'm sure some people that are much cleverer than me will figure it out. But right now, there's investment that's going in that really isn't justified through any economic model that's established today. And so I think until enterprises can see the true value of moving, the traditional workload is going to be here to stay.
And I suppose there's parallel here between OCP hardware and enterprise hardware. OCP hardware was traditionally the type of hardware you'd see in a data center environment, and enterprise hardware was traditionally what you would see in enterprise, and also with chip design. So a few years ago, you had the advent of chiplets being used by Google
Mhm.
and redesigns by the hyperscalers, but actually enterprise wouldn't use the same kind of
Yep.
CPUs. Is there a link here between what you're seeing with AI workloads, or is there a parallel?
Not that I've observed. Not that I've observed yet. I mean, the type of compute that's going on is quite different with AI, as we know. And as I say, I think until such time as there's a clear business advantage of a customer moving to that AI way of operating, we're going to see enterprises stick with traditional workloads. I think that's the way I would view it.
Mm-hmm. Because you see a lot of talk in the press about people pulling away from AI workloads because they're not seeing return on investment, for example. Is that because they're using them for specific use cases rather than investment use cases as OpenAI is?
I think that's part of it. I mean, again, you're looking at it from an enterprise customer perspective. Typically most enterprises will use off-the-shelf enterprise software, ERP, CRM, etc. And the suppliers that they're using will introduce some form of AI functionality on top. But the issue you have then is that you get these little islands of AI that are specific to apps. And for me, the real power of AI is when you can extract the data from all of these systems and combine it centrally, and focus it on whatever the core of your business actually is. And that sounds really simple to do, but it's incredibly difficult to do. Because as we know from our own experience at TechBuyer, you have to have data in the right place. It needs to be reliable, and you need to be able to meld it with other data sources and information sources to create value.
Yeah, and I suppose it's the boring old-fashioned stuff that you really need to get right first. And traditional enterprise hardware is really good at the boring old-fashioned stuff.
That's right.
And making it effective and ready.
Yeah, that's right.
And reliable.
That's right. So I think a lot of these projects, as technical people tend to do, they get very excited about anything that's new and bright and shiny. So you go off and do the exciting stuff, maybe without the right due diligence. And I think what we've learned is that AI is only as smart as the information that you feed it. So training it is really important. So having the right data and knowledge is absolutely critical. So you have to do those less exciting things first, to tee up AI for the value that's to come. So I think it's been a very interesting learning curve for a lot of companies. But in the end, we can all see the power of it. So I have no doubt that in the end it will emerge. But I think there's quite a lot of work to do before we see that.
So one of the conversations that you were having at DCW is about the capability of AI to improve hardware, predictive analytics, predictive maintenance, that kind of thing, which was suitable for a headline conference.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to pick up on some of those themes here and discuss these, and then we can move on to what this might look for for an enterprise company.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think as we know, AI is incredibly powerful at doing repetitive tasks, pattern matching, picking up trends, all of which are incredibly important for predictive or even preemptive service activities.
Mhm.
So it's clearly a very powerful tool. Again, I go back to the fact that today what we tend to have is information that's in silos. So even in traditional IT, the vendors will likely have the data that's unique to their particular products. So if you're I don't know, an HPE purchaser, HP will have a tool that does health checking and capacity management.
Yeah, it's not a new thing. It's
No,
not like we invented it over the last 12 months.
no, exactly. And as we explored, this is going to require us to look much more closely at bringing these silos together, especially between enterprise IT and the data center organizations. So we've got to find a way to sort of open up the information to be focused on the outcome that we want, which is to be utilizing our equipment in the most effective way to sustain it for as long as possible, and to sort of, by definition, be looking at additional work activities or job descriptions that these assets can be provided after their current assignment is over. And I mean, there are platforms that exist today that can help with that sort of thing, but again, they tend to be vendor specific as opposed to vendor agnostic. So I think there's a big opportunity there, actually.
And I suppose basically what you're doing for your IT workloads, to use your analogy, is reverse planning their career path. So how do
Correct.
they come down from the basics rather than go up through the basics? And that's something that is presumably much more applicable to a refurbished model or a circular economy model. Do you think that that's something that the vendors have really been looking at up till now? Is it a new thing in the market to think about things in that way?
So do the vendors think about it? I don't really believe so. They have a very well established business model. I know it very well because I lived in a vendor for most of my career. So yeah, they have a proven pattern that serves their business model very well, but it's not at all tied to the longevity or useful life of the asset. It's an economic model that they've established. I think under normal circumstances where there are no supply chain constraints, it works perfectly well. And there was a balance between new products and companies that actually like to use refurbished, and a number of them. There are a number of companies, and especially government departments actually, that won't buy new. They want to buy refurbished. I think the supply chain constraints are really forcing these companies to look at the secondary market much more seriously, and rather than sort of dipping in and out of it in a more transactional way, are actually now looking at how do I establish a proper supply chain relationship with a secondary market supplier where I know I can get good quality products reliably, on time, and with all of the right support and after sales experience that you would associate with an OEM. And I guess that's what we're trying to do here at TechBuyer, is really elevate our experience such that it gives a customer choice.
And also with all the bells and whistles, the circular economy version of predictive maintenance, all that kind of evidence-based, now you do this and this is why, and now you can do this and this is why, so that people have a roadmap.
That's right.
Of how to use it. Should be really important.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, we need to. I mean, I think we have a job to elevate the understanding of enterprise IT teams to what's possible here. and to help them along the way wherever we can.
Okay, thank you very much.